In 1957, Muhlenberg College admitted its first female students and officially became a co-ed college. While allowing women to study alongside the men was an important step toward gender equality, Muhlenberg College was not ready to allow female students as much freedom as the men. It wouldn't be ready to do so for a long time. The 1960s was a decade of fun and freedom, where women's rights began to expand so women could become more independent from their male counterparts. More women than ever were in the paid workforce, birth control pills became legal for married women, and Americans began to accept the goals that women had set for the decade. However, it seems as though Muhlenberg didn't quite want to follow the country by jumping into these cultural changes head-on. Prior to coeducation, the rules that Muhlenberg students were held to were pretty standard for the time. The men of Muhlenberg were expected to act respectful on and off campus, and carry themselves in a way that would not reflect poorly on the college. However, when women are first mentioned in the student handbook given to all Muhlenberg freshmen, called the M-Book, in 1959, there is also a reference to a separate women's handbook. This separate handbook that women were required to follow in addition to the M-Book existed from 1959 until 1970. The only women's handbook currently in the Trexler Library archives is from 1967, exactly 10 years after coeducation began. What were the standards that women on campus were held to even after being an integral part of Muhlenberg's culture for 10 years? The women's handbook stated that a woman of Muhlenberg College is expected to comport herself everywhere in a manner that will not bring discredit upon the college or upon its student body. Any conduct unbecoming to a lady will be sufficient cause for disciplinary action by Women's Council. In 1967, the women's dress code was set up so that women were discouraged from wearing pants, even though they were technically allowed. The women's handbook stated that while women were allowed to wear pants, if they did, they wouldn't be allowed to go many places on campus or attend a majority of school events. The most strict rules that female students had to follow were in regards to the residence halls. Women's rooms were subject to inspections, and girls received disciplinary action if their room was too messy. Every female student had to sign in and out of the building if they went out after 7 p.m., and the women's dormitory was locked every night at curfew. After a few years of coeducation, while the women's curfew was still strictly enforced, a program was approved by the Women's Council that allowed senior co-eds to be on campus without a curfew, as long as they received parental permission. With strict rules come strict punishments. Section 3 of the Women's Handbook is entirely about disciplinary systems. Demerits would be given for things like having a messy room or failing to sign in and out of the dorm when leaving at night. If they received too many demerits, a woman could be given a campus or a social probation. These punishments were very similar to being grounded or put on house arrest. A woman given a campus was required to stay in her room from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. and could not leave the dorm for any function or activity until breakfast the next morning. She also couldn't receive visitors, phone calls, or intercom calls. A social probation was the same as a campus, but the woman also could not leave campus without written permission from the house mother on duty or another woman in a position of power. She was also not allowed to entertain dates in the dorm, and she forfeited her privilege of visiting the men's dorms and fraternity houses. Despite how slowly it took Muhlenberg to allow equal status for male and female students, even after women had been at Muhlenberg for a whole decade, it's important to recognize that these strict rules didn't last forever. Gender segregation was nowhere to be seen in the 1972-1973 M-Book, and now, as 2019 comes to a close, men and women on Muhlenberg's campus can wear whatever they want and leave campus and stay out as late as they please.